How is the tour going so far?
The tour is perfectly fine. I mean, we started in South America, started in Brazil in, when was it, I think early October. Did Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Costa Rica and Mexico. Worked our way up. Now we're in the US, we've already been to Canada, we'll be back to Canada next week I think for a couple of more shows. And we're having great fun.
Are you happy with the crowd reception for the new album?
Crowd reception is awesome, especially the good thing is the reception for the new songs is outstanding, I have to say, because what normally happens is that people need a while to get used to the new stuff, and the reactions to new songs on the first tour when we play them is a little bit lower compared to the classics, and on the next tour then the formerly new songs are classics as well. It's different this time because the reactions to the new stuff is pretty much the same compared to the old stuff, so the songs seem to be working extremely well in the live situation and people are digging it. So we're pretty happy about that.
What can you tell us about the concept of Beyond the Red River?
The basic idea actually came from a couple of songs from the Imaginations from the Other Side album, which were kind of linked in the story. They tell the story of a little boy living in a world similar to ours, but he's supposed to step through a portal into a different world and become kind of bringer of balance, whatever, fulfill his destiny. But actually that's the point where the story ends on the Imaginations album, and we never got to know if the boy took that step into the other world. And that's when Hansi realized that he never finished that story, and he had the idea to come back to that story and finally finish it. And we pick it up like 20 years later. The little boy is a grown-up man now, and we get to know that back then, because he was still a child, he was too afraid to take that step, which had pretty catastrophic results on both worlds. And he finally accepted his fate, and he embarks on a kind of journey for that final open portal to finally take that step into the other world and fulfill his destiny. So that's the basic story about it.
And this is a very complex album musically. Did you approach the songwriting differently from the past?
No, Blind Guardian is known for not really simple, straightforward music, I guess. So the approach for the songwriting was pretty much the same as always. You know, we try all kinds of things that come to our mind, and if we like them, they stay in the songs, and if we don't, we start all over again or kick them out or whatever. And we immediately knew right from the beginning, after working on the previous album, that we wanted to work with the orchestra again, because that's something that we really liked on the previous one, when we could finally work with a real orchestra for the first time. So we immediately knew that we would explore this further, but we also tried different things that we never did in the past. For example, we worked with down-tuned 7-string guitars and stuff like that. And it just makes you play differently, because it sounds completely different compared to a regular tuned normal guitar, and you come up with different riffs, you interpret things different, and you go on a different path. And we played around with kind of futuristic sound effects a lot, and you know, we were playing around with all kinds of things that came to our mind, and well, the result is the new album. And yeah, it's pretty complex, but we like it that way.
So do you think the music style has changed?
It changed over the years for sure. I mean, if you compare how we sounded in the 80s when we started with Battalions of Fear, and you compare it to the last albums, it's something completely different, even though the roots are still the same. You know, you can still hear it's Blind Guardian. But I mean, this change is something that we need to have, because if we would still be sounding like in 88, 87, I think we would have split up years ago already, because it would be too boring for us, and I think it would also be too boring for the fans. Like this, for us, every album is something fresh, something new, and a kind of next step in whatever direction that might be, because when we start writing, we have no idea in what direction we will be going. We will just have to see what happens. But the fans also know that they will always get something that will sound like Blind Guardian, but it will be something different compared to what we did in the past. And that's just the way it works for us. As I said, we couldn't do the same thing over again. Sometimes, I mean, obviously fans have favorite albums, like with every band. And sometimes somebody comes to me and says, oh, whatever, Imaginations is my favorite Blind Guardian album. When will you do something like this again? The answer is always the same, never, because we already did it, and if that person loves the album, great, grab it, listen to it, but don't expect us to redo the same thing again, because that's not what we want, you know. I mean, as I said, the roots are still there, and they will always be there, but we will always look for that next step to go somewhere else where we haven't been before.
So this is also your 10th full-length album. How do you feel about such an achievement?
To be honest, I don't really think about it much. You know, for us it's just the next album, and we're on the next tour now. And as soon as we're done with the tour, which will still be in a while, I mean, we'll be on the road until the end of next year. Then we start working on the next album. But we don't really think in such things like it's whatever, how much anniversary, or we did like 10, 15 albums or whatever. That's something that doesn't really matter for us. We just focus on the music and on the tours, on the gigs, and we don't really think in such numbers.
So since you're going to be busy on tour, you don't know when you will start working on new music, right?
Not before the tour is done, because the thing is, once we're touring, I mean, we're constantly playing the old songs, obviously, on tour, and you know, I think the average set length is like 17 or 18 songs that we play per night, but we prepared like 45 or so.
Wow.
And that's what's in our heads all day long. And if we would, I could grab a guitar now and start writing some stuff, but it would immediately sound like the old stuff, because that's what's surrounding us all day long. So we only start working on new material when the tour really is done, and we go home and we get the old stuff out of our minds, and then we can start fresh. So there won't be any work on new material before the end of next year.
You mentioned working with the orchestra. Was that something you planned to do, or it just came along?
It's something that we wanted to do for a long time. I mean, we experimented with orchestrations ever since Nightfall, I think. I don't remember. I think it started on Nightfall. But back then we couldn't afford to work with a real orchestra, so it was all programmed keyboards. And I mean, with modern keyboard technology, you can do great things that sound pretty good, but it's no match for the real thing. You know, the real big orchestra, it just sounds better. And we always wanted to do that, but as I said, it's a question of time, of money. You have to prepare everything, because obviously you can't go to an orchestra, hand them a tape and say, oh, can you please play like this? You have to write down all the score and everything for them. It's a lot of work. A lot of things have to be prepared. And with the previous album, we finally had the chance, and we found the right orchestra that did a fantastic job. And we definitely wanted to do this again, and I'm pretty sure we will do it again in the future. It doesn't necessarily mean that every Blind Guardian song in the future will have an orchestra, for sure not, because that would also be too one-sided, too limited. But that's something that we really enjoy doing, and it opens up whole new dimensions for our sound, and we're looking forward to doing something like this again, in whatever way it will be. I don't know yet.
And do you listen to classical music, opera?
I'm not really listening to opera or classical music in that sense. What I love listening to is movie soundtracks. There's some great stuff. I mean, the Star Wars soundtrack, ever since I've been a kid, it attracted me a lot, because I love the movies. Or, you know, a soundtrack that I really love is the soundtrack from the first Conan movie, done by Basil Poledouris, which is pure classical music, but it's very strong, very powerful, and I like it a lot. So I prefer those kind of things over the typical kind of Bach, Wagner, whatever classical stuff, even though there's good stuff as well, obviously. But that's not really what I have, you know, in my CD collection.
And what about metal? What do you listen to?
I listen to all kinds of things. You know, for me, I don't really think in categories. For me, there's just two kinds of music: the songs that I like and the songs that I don't like. And if a song attracts me, I couldn't care less if it's metal, pop, rock, whatever. You know, I don't care. In the moment, there are a couple of things on heavy rotation for me. It's the latest Amorphis album, Under the Red Cloud, I think it's called. It's amazing. I've always loved that band, but that album just blows everything away. And actually on tour we met the guys from Ignite, a hardcore punk band from the States, I think, and we got to talk, and I started listening to their stuff, and it's really, really good. That's also something that I always like, bands like Bad Religion and stuff like this melodic punk stuff. And you know, there's all kinds of stuff. I mean, when we're on tour, I have tons of music on my phone, and there's constantly something playing. But as I would say, in the moment, definitely the Amorphis is my top album on the list.
And is there any particular artist with whom you would like to collaborate? Like if you could have a side music project or something like that?
I have to say that's something that I never really thought about, especially, but you know, the person that would come to my mind immediately would be Tony Iommi, because that's one of my all-time heroes, and that's actually the guy that is responsible for me playing guitar. You know, when I started playing guitar, I was like 10, 11, something like that. I learned classical acoustic guitar in the local music school. But you know, at home I was putting on Sabbath albums and learning all his riffs, and that was one of my main inspirations always. And I think you know, this guy, if he picks up a guitar and plays a riff, that's the way the riff is supposed to be played. So he would be a nice choice. But there are many people that I really respect and admire. I mean, the guys of Queen or Rush or whatever. There's so many great musicians. So I think I could put together a dream band that I would love to work with for fun. But as I said, Tony would be the first choice immediately coming to my mind. Even though he also plays guitar, so we would have to share that job. But
So you've been around now many years. Do you miss anything of the early days of the music scene when you started?
Do I miss something? I mean, things changed, and especially, you know, our whole attitude changed. You know, when we did the first kind of tours, we didn't care much. We just wanted to have a good time. We were drinking all the time, having a party, and in between going on stage playing a gig. And at some point we became a professional band. We realized that there are people actually paying for tickets, and that we should give them the best show that we can possibly give them. I just see everything as a kind of evolution, so it's not really that I miss something, you know. Every period of the band that we went through was great, you know. As I said at the beginning, everything was just innocent, you know. There were a couple of kids that just wanted to play their music, and we had the chance to record albums and go on the road, and we just enjoyed it to the maximum. And everything grew. I mean, when we started, we played like very, very small gigs inside Germany, and you know, a couple of years later we were touring the world and playing in Japan and whatever. All those steps that we took were really important for us and made us grow as musicians, as persons, you know. I mean, seeing the world is the best thing that can happen to anybody, I think, because you learn so much, you get so many impressions from everywhere. So I don't really miss anything, I have to say. I mean, I'm enjoying where we are now. I have no idea where we'll be next year or with the next tour, with the next album, but I'm looking forward to this. And there are so many places yet that we did not go to, you know, places. We played South Africa at some point, but you know, there's so many African countries where we never played. There are some Asian countries like China where we never played a gig so far. And I just like to go everywhere, play gigs, meet people, talk to them, see the country, and just suck it all up. So if everything for us would end at some point, that would be something that I would be missing.
Okay, makes sense. And 20 years after, do you still identify with Imaginations from the other side?
As I said, it's 20 years after we did that album, but it's, if I think about it, the other day we were talking about the recordings when we went to the Sweet Silence and did the album with Fleming, and when we think about it, it just feels like yesterday or last week or something like this. So all the memories are still so fresh. And as I said, we or at least I don't really think in such numbers like years, and it has been 20 years ago or whatever. For me it's just an album that we did, an album that I still love. I mean, I still love all our albums, I have to say, because every album represents what Blind Guardian was about at that point in time. And Imaginations is a very special album for me, because it was the first one that we did with Flemming Rasmussen back then in Sweet Silence Studio, and we learned a lot, because all the previous albums we did with the same producer in Germany, and we learned a lot with that guy as well, especially when we did the first albums, and he taught us a lot about working in the studio and everything. But Flemming was a whole different step. He turned us into much better musicians, I guess, and we just had a great time. So Imaginations will always be something special, because it was a very important album for us. It was a big step musically, it was a big step for us as musicians. We spent like half a year or 8 months in Copenhagen and had a great time there, so we enjoyed it.
There are many bands that re-record a famous album to celebrate anniversaries and stuff. Would you do that?
I have to say, I wouldn't like the idea of re-recording a whole album. I mean, we re-recorded a couple of old songs, which is okay, because especially if we're talking about the very early albums, the productions were not as good as the present ones are now. So sometimes it can be fun to redo something and show the people how we would have done it today. But I don't really like the idea of re-recording a whole album, because, as I said, I still love every album that we did, and I wouldn't want to change much about it, because that's how we have been back then. Imaginations came out in '95, and that's how we sounded like in '95, so I don't really see a reason of redoing the whole thing now. I wouldn't change anything about the songs anyway, because I think the songs are perfectly fine the way they are. So what we would do is we would just go into the studio and record everything with the sounds of today, so it would sound a bit different. But I don't really see a reason for that. So I prefer to just, maybe play a couple of songs of that album to celebrate it on the tour or whatever, but that's fine for me. I don't really see any need of redoing everything. That would be messing with the past. I prefer to look into the future and take the next step in order to, instead of going back and doing stuff from the past again.
What are your expectations for the future of Blind Guardian?
I have no idea.
Whatever happens.
I mean, I know what we'll be doing until the end of next year, which will be touring. We will still be here in the US until the end of November, and we'll go home for like 2 weeks, 10 days, something like that, before we play some more shows in Germany, in Netherlands, and I think in Prague. And maybe we'll have a break for Christmas. And next year everything continues, so I know what we'll be doing until the end of next year, and most likely we'll immediately start working on new stuff. I mean, in between we'll work on a live album. We recorded every single show so far, and we will continue doing this until the end of the year. So we'll put together a new live album, which most likely will come out sometime next year. And as I said, then we'll start working on new songs. I have no idea what they're going to sound like because nothing is planned. We'll just start writing at some point and see what happens. And the whole thing will start all over again, you know. At some point we'll be done with songwriting, we'll start recording, and once the album is released, we'll hit the road again. And that's how it has been for the last 30 years, and most likely it will be like that for the next 30 years, hopefully.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, we love what we're doing, we enjoy it, so, you know, there's no thought of changing anything, so we just go for it.
Okay, well, good luck with everything.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for the interview.
You're very welcome.